When my son told me my 11-year-old grandson couldn't come to his daughter's graduation party because he might embarrass the family, I didn't cry. I didn't beg him to reconsider. I just said, "I understand," and that was it. My name is Margaret Sullivan. I'm 67 years old, a retired librarian from a small town outside Minneapolis, and I've been raising my grandson Tommy since he was 8. He came into my life on the worst day I've ever lived through. The day my daughter Sarah died in a car accident on Highway 35. Tommy was in the back seat, buckled in tight, crying for his mama. He didn't understand why she wouldn't wake up. I'm not sure he fully understands even now. But what he does understand is that I'm here, that I chose him, that I will always choose him. Tommy has Down syndrome. He's got the sweetest smile you've ever seen, a laugh that fills up a room, and a heart bigger than most adults I know. He's also got challenges. He struggles with reading, he gets overwhelmed in loud spaces. Sometimes he needs things repeated 3 or 4 times before they stick. But he's my grandson, and from the moment Sarah placed him in my arms when he was born, I made him a promise. You will always belong. You will always matter. I thought I was keeping that promise. I thought my family understood it too. Until the graduation party. My older son Brian got engaged to Jennifer about 15 years ago. They have 2 children, Emma, who just turned 13, and Connor, who's 9. From the outside, they look like the perfect family. Big house in the suburbs. Matching Christmas cards. The kind of people who plan their vacations a year in advance and never forget a birthday. But underneath all that polish, there's something cold. I didn't want to see it for a long time. I made excuses. I told myself they were just busy, just stressed, just trying to keep up with their own lives. But the truth is, they never really accepted Tommy. Not the way a family should. It started small. When Sarah was still alive, Brian and Jennifer would visit, and they'd always find a reason to cut the visit short if Tommy was having a hard day. If he got upset or needed extra attention, they'd exchange looks. Those quick, silent conversations that say more than words ever could. Jennifer would check her watch. Brian would suddenly remember an errand. They'd be gone within 20 minutes, Sarah noticed. She never said anything to them, but she told me once, over coffee in my kitchen, that it hurt. That she wished her brother could see Tommy the way she did, not as a burden, but as a gift. She said, "Mom, I just want them to try. Just once, I want them to really see him." She never got that chance. After Sarah died, I became Tommy's legal guardian. It was the easiest decision I've ever made and the hardest thing I've ever done. Tommy needed stability. He needed someone who knew him, who loved him, who wouldn't give up when things got difficult. I was 64, recently retired, and honestly, I was terrified. But I looked at that little boy, still asking when his mama was coming home, and I knew there was no other choice. So I rearranged my life. I turned Sarah's old bedroom into Tommy's room. I learned about IEPs and therapy schedules and sensory-friendly clothing. I read books about Down syndrome until my eyes hurt. And slowly, we found our rhythm. Tommy started calling me Grandma Maggie. He started sleeping through the night. He started smiling again. But Brian and Jennifer, they pulled away. At first, I thought they were grieving Sarah. I gave them space. I didn't push. But then the patterns started. The same patterns Sarah had seen before she died. When I'd invite them over for Sunday dinner, they'd come, but they'd leave early. They'd say Emma had homework or Connor had a game, even when I knew neither was true. When Tommy would try to show them something, a drawing he made or a new word he learned, they'd nod and smile, but their eyes would already be somewhere else. Jennifer started texting instead of calling. Brian stopped asking how Tommy was doing. They'd ask about me, about the house, about the weather, but never about him. It was like he'd become invisible. The first time it really hit me was Tommy's 9th birthday. I threw him a party. Nothing fancy, just cake and decorations and a few kids from his special education class at school. I invited Brian and Jennifer and the kids, of course. They said they'd come. Tommy was so excited. He kept asking me, "Will Emma be here? Will Connor?" He'd picked out a special toy to show Connor, a little train set he'd been playing with all week. The day of the party, an hour before everyone was supposed to arrive, Jennifer texted me, "So sorry, Emma has a last-minute sleepover invite, we can't make it, we'll drop off a gift next week." They never dropped off a gift. I didn't tell Tommy they'd canceled. I just said they got stuck in traffic. But he knew. Kids always know. When Tommy was 10, my mother passed away. She was 92, and it was peaceful. The funeral was small, just family. Afterward, we gathered at my house. Tommy was having a hard day. He didn't understand why great-grandma wasn't there anymore. He kept asking questions, getting louder, needing reassurance. I was trying to comfort him, trying to explain in words he could understand, when I heard Jennifer whisper to Brian in the hallway. She didn't know I was right around the corner. She said, "This is exactly why we didn't want the kids to come. It's too much. He's too much." Brian didn't disagree. He just said, "Let's go say goodbye and get out of here." I stood there, frozen, holding Tommy's hand, and I felt something crack inside me, but I didn't say anything. I told myself she was grieving, that people say things they don't mean when they're grieving. I let it go. Then came Emma's graduation party. Middle school graduation isn't usually a big deal, but Brian and Jennifer decided to make it one. They rented out a banquet hall, they hired a caterer, they sent out formal invitations with Emma's school photo on the front. When my invitation arrived, it was addressed only to me, not Margaret and Tommy, just Margaret Sullivan. I stared at that envelope for a long time before I opened it. Inside, there was a handwritten note from Jennifer. "We're keeping this event adults and older teens only. Hope you understand. Can't wait to see you there." I read it 3 times. Adults and older teens. Tommy was 11, he wasn't an adult, he wasn't a teen, he was a child, her nephew. And he wasn't invited. I didn't call right away. I needed to think. I needed to understand what I was feeling, because it wasn't just hurt, it was something deeper, sharper. It was the realization that this wasn't an oversight. This was a choice. They were choosing to exclude him. Not because of logistics or space or some reasonable explanation, but because of who he was, because he had Down syndrome, because he might need extra attention, because, in Jennifer's words, he was too much. Tommy noticed the invitation on the counter. He can't read well, but he recognized Emma's picture. He asked me, "Is this for Emma?" I said yes. He asked, "Are we going to her party?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to lie to him, but I also didn't want to hurt him. So I said, "I'm not sure yet, buddy, we'll see." He smiled, that big, trusting smile, and went back to playing with his blocks. And I felt like the worst grandmother in the world. That evening, I called Brian. I kept my voice calm, neutral. I said, "I got the invitation to Emma's party. I noticed it's just for me." There was a pause. Then he said, "Yeah, Mom, we talked about it. We're trying to keep it to a certain age group. So the kids can enjoy themselves without, distractions." Distractions. That's what he called his nephew, a distraction. I said, "Tommy's family. Brian. He's Emma's cousin." Another pause. Longer this time. Then he said, "Mom, please don't make this difficult. It's one party. It's not a big deal." I waited for him to say something else. An apology. An explanation that made sense. Anything. But he just said, "We really hope you can still come. It would mean a lot to Emma." I didn't argue. I didn't tell him what I was thinking. I just said, "I understand." And I hung up. Tommy was in the living room, still playing, still humming to himself, still trusting that the world was a kind place, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to subject him to this anymore. I wasn't going to keep hoping they'd change, keep making excuses for why they treated him like he didn't matter. Sarah had asked for them to try. They never did. And now Sarah was gone, and I was the only one left to protect him, so that's what I was going to do. The next morning, I texted Brian, "I won't be attending the party. I hope Emma has a wonderful day." He called me immediately. I let it ring. He called again. I sent it to voicemail. Then Jennifer called. I ignored that too. Finally, a text from Brian. Mom, what's going on? Did I say something wrong? I didn't respond. A few hours later, another text. If this is about Tommy, I'm sorry, but we have to think about all the kids. It's not personal. Not personal. As if excluding a child from a family event could ever be anything but personal. 2 days before the party, Brian showed up at my house. I was in the garden with Tommy. He was helping me plant tomatoes, which mostly meant he was digging holes and getting dirt everywhere, but he was happy. Brian walked around the side of the house and said, Mom, we need to talk. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my knees, and said, Tommy, why don't you go wash your hands and get a snack? I'll be inside in a minute. Tommy nodded and ran off. Brian watched him go, then turned to me. I don't understand why you're so upset. It's one party. You're really going to miss Emma's big day over this? I looked at my son, this man I raised, this man who I thought understood what family meant, and I said, Do you hear yourself? You're asking me to choose between attending a party and standing by my grandson. That's not a choice, Brian. That's an insult. He sighed, rubbed his face like I was the one being unreasonable. Mom, Jennifer and I talked about it. The venue is expensive. We're trying to keep it elegant. Tommy, he doesn't do well in those settings. He gets loud, he gets overwhelmed. We can't risk him causing a scene. There it was. The real reason. Not age, not logistics. They were afraid Tommy would embarrass them. I felt my hands start to shake. Not from anger, but from the effort it took to stay calm. I said, He's your nephew. He's family. If you can't make space for him at a family event, then I don't know what kind of family we are anymore. Brian looked away. He kicked at a small rock on the ground. Then he said, Look, I'll be honest. Jennifer's parents are going to be there. They're paying for half of this thing. They already think it's weird that you're raising Tommy. They don't get it. And we don't want to have to explain or manage anything that day. We want it to be perfect for Emma. I stared at him. I stared at my son, and I barely recognized him. I said, You want it to be perfect? So you're erasing Tommy from the family to make Jennifer's parents comfortable? He didn't answer. He just said, I was hoping you'd understand. Sarah would have understood. That was the moment I knew I was done. Using Sarah's name like that, like she would have agreed with him, when she spent her whole life fighting for people to see Tommy the way she did. I said, very quietly, Don't you dare use your sister's name to justify this. He started to say something, then stopped. He ran his hand through his hair, that thing he does when he's frustrated. Fine, don't come to the party. But can you at least watch Tommy that day? So Jennifer and I don't have to worry about finding someone last minute? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He wanted me to babysit. He wanted me to stay home with the grandson he'd just excluded, so that he and his wife could go celebrate without the inconvenience of including him. I looked at Brian, and I felt something I'd never felt toward my son before. Disappointment so deep it felt like grief. I said, No. He blinked. What? I said it again. No. Find someone else. He stared at me. You're serious? You won't even help us out? I said. You made a choice, Brian. You chose to exclude him. I'm making a choice too. I'm choosing not to enable it. He shook his head. This is ridiculous. You're acting like we're terrible people. We're just trying to have a nice event for our daughter, I said. Then have it. But don't ask me to participate in making Tommy feel like he doesn't belong. I've already failed at that enough. He left. He didn't say goodbye to Tommy. He just walked back to his car, got in, and drove away. Tommy came outside a few minutes later, juice box in hand, and asked, Where did Uncle Brian go? I said, He had to leave, sweetheart. Tommy nodded, unbothered, and went back to his tomatoes. I stood there watching him, this beautiful boy who'd lost his mother, who'd been through more than any child should go through, and who still woke up every morning with a smile. And I knew I'd made the right choice. The party came and went. I didn't go. I didn't send a gift. I didn't text congratulations. For the first time in my life, I simply didn't show up for my family, and it felt awful. It felt like a betrayal of everything I'd been raised to believe about keeping the peace, about being the bigger person, about family coming first. But then I'd look at Tommy, and I'd remember. He was family too, and he'd been coming last for too long. 3 days after the party, my phone started buzzing. Messages in the family group chat. My younger sister, Linda, sent a photo of Emma in her graduation dress with the caption, "So proud of this girl." A few people replied with heart emojis. Then Jennifer posted a photo of the whole party, dozens of people, tables with fancy centerpieces, Emma cutting a huge cake. The caption read, "Perfect day with perfect people." I stared at that phrase, perfect people. I thought about Tommy, who would never be included in that definition. I left the group chat. I didn't make an announcement, I just quietly exited. 10 minutes later, Linda called. "Maggie, what's going on? You left the family chat." I said, "I'm not interested in being part of that anymore." She was quiet for a moment. "Is this about Tommy not being invited? Brian said you were upset." I said, "Brian excluded an 11-year-old child from a family event because he was afraid Tommy might not be perfect enough." "Yes, Linda, I'm upset," she sighed. "I get it, but it was their call to make. It's their party. You can't control everything." I said, "I'm not trying to control anything, I'm just choosing not to pretend it's okay." She didn't know what to say to that. Over the next few weeks, the silence grew. No calls from Brian, no texts from Jennifer. My mother's side of the family, they started reaching out, asking if everything was all right. I kept my answers vague. I said I was busy with Tommy, which was true. I said I needed some space, which was also true. But I didn't explain, I didn't defend myself, I just quietly pulled back from all of it. The Sunday dinners I used to host, the birthday parties I used to coordinate, the holidays I used to plan. I stopped. I stopped performing. I stopped pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. And the strangest thing happened. I felt lighter. For the first time in 3 years, since Sarah died, I felt like I could breathe. Then July came. July meant one thing in our family, the annual 4th of July barbecue at my house. It had been a tradition for 20 years. I'd host, everyone would bring a dish, we'd watch fireworks from my backyard. It was expected, it was assumed, except this year, I didn't send out the invitation. I didn't buy the burgers, I didn't set up the chairs. Around mid-June, Linda texted me, "Should I bring potato salad or coleslaw this year?" I didn't respond. A few days later, Brian's wife Jennifer sent a group text. "Can't wait for the 4th. Should we plan on the usual time?" I didn't respond to that either. I just turned off my phone and took Tommy to the park. The questions kept coming. By late June, my phone was full of missed calls and voicemails. "Mom, are we still doing the barbecue?" "Maggie, what's the plan for the 4th?" "Margaret, your brother's asking if we're meeting at your place." I didn't answer any of them. Finally, 3 days before the 4th, Brian called. I picked up. He said, "Mom, seriously, what's going on? Are we doing this or not?" I said, very calmly, "I'm not hosting this year." Silence. Then, "What do you mean you're not hosting?" I said, "I mean I'm not doing it. You'll have to make other plans." He let out this frustrated breath. "You can't just cancel a family tradition without telling anyone," I said. "I'm telling you now." He said, "This is because of Emma's party, isn't it?" "You're still mad about that," I said. "I'm not mad, Brian. I'm just done pretending everything's fine when it's not." More silence. Then he said, "So what, you're just gonna cut us all off? Punish everyone because you didn't get your way?" I almost laughed. "I didn't get my way? Brian, my grandson was excluded from a family event because you were embarrassed by him. This isn't about getting my way. This is about protecting him." He said, "You're being dramatic. Nobody's embarrassed. We just wanted a nice party." I said, "Then I hope you had one. And I hope you have a nice 4th of July too. But it won't be at my house." I hung up. I sat there on my couch, Tommy watching cartoons next to me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect, the kind that comes from finally being honest, from finally saying no, from finally choosing the person who needed me most instead of the people who expected me to keep giving while offering nothing in return. The 4th of July came. Tommy and I spent it at the lake. We packed sandwiches and lemonade and a blanket. We fed ducks. We watched the fireworks from the shore, just the two of us, no one asking me to pass the ketchup, no one making small talk while ignoring my grandson, no one whispering about whether Tommy was behaving appropriately, just us. Tommy fell asleep on the way home, his head against the car window, his hand holding mine. And I thought, this is what family is supposed to feel like. Safe, wanted, whole. The fallout came later. I got angry texts from Jennifer. You really hurt Emma by not hosting. She was looking forward to it. I didn't respond. Linda called, frustrated. Maggie, you're tearing this family apart, all because of one party. I said, Linda, they excluded a child. If that doesn't bother you, I don't know what to tell you. She said, he's different, Maggie. You have to understand that makes things hard. I said, different doesn't mean less. It doesn't mean disposable. And if you can't understand that, then maybe we don't have much to talk about right now. She hung up. The silence that followed was heavy. Weeks turned into months. No calls, no texts, no birthday wishes when Tommy turned 12 in August. I took him to the zoo. We had cake, just the two of us. He didn't ask where everyone was. He'd stopped asking a long time ago, but I saw it in his eyes sometimes, that flicker of sadness when he'd see other kids with their cousins, their aunts and uncles, their big extended families, and it broke my heart all over again. But what broke my heart more was the thought of taking him back to a family that tolerated him instead of loving him, that made space for him out of obligation instead of joy. It was in late September when things came to a head. Tommy was in the kitchen, working on a puzzle, when my phone rang. It was Brian. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me answer. He didn't say hello, he just started talking. Mom, Jennifer's parents are in town. They're asking about you. About why you weren't at Emma's party, why we didn't do the 4th at your place. Jennifer told them, you're mad at us. They think it's weird, they think you're being difficult. I let him finish. Then I said, Brian, I don't care what Jennifer's parents think. He said, well, I do, and I need you to fix this. Can you at least come to dinner this weekend, show them everything's fine? I closed my eyes. Everything's not fine, Brian. He said, it could be if you'd just let this go. And that's when I said it, the thing I'd been holding back for months. Let what go, exactly? The fact that you excluded your nephew from a family event? The fact that you asked me to babysit him so you wouldn't have to deal with him? The fact that you've spent the last 3 years making him feel invisible? Which part am I supposed to let go? He was quiet. Then he said, softly, he's hard, Mom. You have to admit that. He's hard. I felt tears sting my eyes. He's a child, Brian. He's an 11-year-old boy who lost his mother and didn't ask for any of this. And yes, he needs extra patience, extra love, extra understanding. But that's what family does. They show up. They try. They don't give up, Brian said. We're not giving up. We're just being realistic. I said, no. You're being cruel. And you're teaching your children to be cruel too. He hung up on me. I sat there, phone in my hand, shaking. Tommy looked up from his puzzle. Grandma Maggie, are you sad? I wiped my eyes and smiled at him. No, sweetheart, I'm okay. He came over and hugged me, this beautiful boy with his crooked smile and his giant heart, and he said, it's okay to be sad sometimes. That's what you always tell me. I held him tight. You're right, buddy. You're absolutely right. I didn't hear from Brian again for months. Thanksgiving came and went. We had turkey sandwiches and watched football. Just us. Christmas, I decorated the house. Tommy helped me put lights on the tree. We made cookies. We sang carols off-key. We opened presents on Christmas morning, just the two of us in our pajamas, and it was perfect. No tension, no forced smiles, no pretending, just love, pure, Uncomplicated love. It was in January when the letter came. It was from Brian. Not a text, not a call, an actual letter. I opened it slowly. It was typed, formal, like a business letter. It said, "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About us being cruel. I don't think that's fair. We're just trying to do what's best for our family. Tommy is part of our family, but he's not our responsibility. He's yours, and we can't let your choices dictate how we live our lives. I hope someday you'll understand that. But until then, I think it's best if we keep our distance. The kids are asking about you. I told them Grandma needed some space. I hope that's okay, Brian." I read it twice. Then I folded it up and put it in a drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't call him. I just went back to making lunch for Tommy. Because here's what I'd learned over the past 6 months. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you even when it's hard, even when it's messy, even when it's inconvenient. And sometimes, the family you have isn't the family you need. Sometimes, you have to build a new one. Tommy and I, we built ours. We found it in his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who stayed late to help him with his reading, and sent me encouraging texts on hard days. We found it in our neighbor, Mr. Chen, who invited Tommy to help him garden every Saturday and never once treated him like he was different. We found it in the moms from Tommy's support group, women who understood what it meant to love a child the world didn't always make space for. We found it in each other, in our quiet mornings and our silly jokes and our deep, unshakable bond. And I realized something. This, right here, this was family. Not the people who made excuses for why they couldn't love my grandson, but the people who chose to, every single day. If you're reading this, and you've been there, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting someone you love, I want you to know, it's okay to choose them. It's okay to walk away from people who ask you to shrink, to accommodate their discomfort at the expense of someone's dignity. It's okay to set boundaries, even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. Because love that requires you to abandon the people who need you most isn't love at all, it's performance. And you don't owe anyone that performance. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone. You owe your child, your person, your whole heart. And sometimes, that means saying no to everyone else. And that's not just okay, that's exactly right.